Welcome to PastCast. Join us as we dive into the events and lives that shaped our world. Each episode reveals fascinating facts and stories from history. Today, we're stepping back in time to explore a truly unique phenomenon, fat men's clubs.
It's intriguing how perceptions of body image have changed so dramatically over time. These clubs, which thrived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, actually celebrated obesity in men as a sign of wealth and success.
It's almost unthinkable today, isn't it? We tend to associate obesity with health concerns. What were the underlying factors that contributed to this bigger is better mentality back then?
Well, picture America in the throes of industrialization and economic growth. A robust physique became synonymous with prosperity. It suggested you could afford plentiful food and didn't have to toil away at manual labor. It was a visible marker of social standing.
So it was about more than just physical appearance. It was a statement of social and economic success.
That's fascinating. And this mindset gave rise to fat men's clubs across the country. The very first one popped up in New York City in 1869. And from there, the trend spread rapidly. The New England Fat Men's Club, for instance, had a staggering 10,000 members at its peak.
10,000 members. That's a massive movement. What were the criteria for joining such a club? I imagine there were some unique requirements.
You're absolutely right. Weight, of course, was the primary qualifier. Most clubs had a minimum weight requirement of 200 pounds, some even higher. Can you imagine that being a barrier to entry today?
It's quite a contrast to our modern-day obsession with fitness and weight loss. So it wasn't just a social club, it was a selective group.
Precisely. It wasn't just anyone who could join. Members were typically wealthy businessmen, politicians, and prominent community leaders, the elite of society. Senators, doctors, lawyers, you name it. In fact, even President William Howard Taft, America's heaviest president, attended a Fat Men's Club meeting.
So these gatherings weren't just social, they were hubs for networking and potentially even influencing political landscapes.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what exactly did these clubs do?
You read my mind. I'm picturing lavish banquets, but surely there was more to it than just indulging in extravagant meals.
Oh, they certainly had their fair share of grand banquets. Tables laden with food as a testament to the era's perception of obesity and wealth. But they were also known for their public weigh-ins.
Public weigh-ins. That's hard to imagine today. Were they like competitions?
You could say that. They were major events with prizes, sometimes even a whole pig awarded to the heaviest member. And believe it or not, there are accounts of men going to great lengths to try and win.
You're not suggesting they cheated, are you?
Let's just say there were some creative tactics employed. Some men stuffed weights in their pockets, hid pillows under their vests, even concealed coins to tip the scales in their favor.
Now that's a story I'd love to hear more about. It sounds almost comical, but I imagine there was a serious side to it as well. Why go to such lengths to be the heaviest?
Remember, this was about more than just bragging rights. In the context of these clubs, being the heaviest was a badge of honor, a symbol of affluence and success. It was a way to solidify your standing within this exclusive circle.
So it was a reflection of the societal values of the time. It's fascinating how something that is now often seen as a health concern was once a mark of social prestige.
It certainly challenges our modern perceptions, doesn't it? And speaking of changing perceptions, that's where we see the decline of these clubs.
What happened? Did their popularity simply fade away?
As we moved into the early 20th century, attitudes toward obesity began to shift. The medical community started recognizing the health risks associated with obesity, and society's views began to change as well.
So the very thing that once brought them together their size ultimately led to their downfall.
Precisely. The New England Fat Men's Club, which once boasted 10,000 members, dwindled down to a mere 38 members by 1924 before disbanding altogether. The changing social landscape simply left no room for their particular brand of celebration.
It's amazing how cultural perceptions can shift so drastically. It makes you wonder what aspects of our current culture might seem strange or outdated a century from now.
Absolutely. But before we delve into that, I'm curious, besides the banquets and weigh-ins, what other activities did these clubs engage in?
Yes. I was wondering about that too. Their activities seem quite intriguing.
Well, these clubs weren't just about feasting and tipping the scales. They organized parades where members proudly displayed their size, held athletic competitions. They showcased a different kind of strength. And they even hosted extravagant balls, high society mingling and all that.
It sounds like they had a vibrant social scene. It's a shame that these clubs, once so prominent, vanished almost as quickly as they emerged.
It is a stark reminder that what's considered normal or even desirable can change so drastically over time. But it's crucial to remember that these clubs existed within a larger social context.
What do you mean by that?
Well, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, social clubs were all the rage. People forming groups around shared interests, professions, identities. It was a way to connect with like-minded individuals and build a sense of community.
So fat men's clubs were just one expression of this broader trend.
Precisely. They weren't an anomaly, but rather a reflection of the social dynamics of the time. People sought out belonging and exclusivity, and these clubs provided a platform for men of a certain size and social standing to come together.
It's interesting to think about how these clubs, despite their focus on size, were actually quite representative of their era.
Exactly. They highlight the human desire for connection and the creation of social hierarchies, something that transcends time and cultural boundaries.
And this exclusivity was carefully cultivated, wasn't it? We've talked about the weight requirements, but what other factors contributed to their elite status?
Well, apart from the obvious physical criteria, membership fees, though relatively small, acted as a further filter. And remember, we're talking about a time when wealth and social standing were deeply intertwined. The fact that members were primarily affluent businessmen and influential figures automatically created an air of exclusivity. It was a self-perpetuating cycle.
So it was a combination of wealth, social connections, and of course size that made these clubs the place to be for a certain segment of society. It was a perfect storm of factors.
Indeed. But let's not forget that behind the public spectacle and the aura of exclusivity, these were real people with individual lives and experiences.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narrative and forget about the human element. What were the lives of these fat men like beyond the club meetings?
While there's no single definitive account of their personal lives, historical records suggest that many of these men were successful businessmen, community leaders, and even politicians. They were husbands, fathers, friends.
So being a member of a fat men's club was just one facet of their identity, not their defining characteristic.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even within a group defined by a shared physical attribute, these men were multidimensional individuals with complex lives and relationships.
I imagine their membership in these clubs might have even influenced their professional and personal relationships outside the club.
That's a fascinating point. Remember, these clubs were also exclusive networking hubs. The connections forged over banquets and weigh-ins could easily translate into business deals and political alliances.
So their size, in a way, became a form of social currency, granting them access to a network of influence that could benefit them in various aspects of their lives. It's remarkable how something as seemingly superficial as weight could have had such a profound impact on their social and professional standing.
It really speaks to the power of social dynamics and how they shape our perceptions of success and belonging. But let's not overlook the fact that within these seemingly homogeneous groups, subtle power dynamics still existed.
You mean even within a club for men of a certain size, there were still hierarchies and social distinctions?
Absolutely. While weight was the primary qualifier for membership, social status and wealth undoubtedly played a role in shaping the internal dynamics of these clubs. Imagine, for instance, a successful banker weighing 250 pounds sharing a table with a shopkeeper who barely tipped the scales at 200. Their social standing outside the club likely influenced their interactions within it. Precisely. And this raises a crucial question. What about the women in their lives? The wives, the daughters, the mothers, how did they perceive these clubs and the men who belonged to them?
It's a question that often goes unanswered in historical accounts. We have glimpses of wives attending club events, but their perspectives and experiences are largely absent from the narrative.
It's a reminder that history is often told from a limited perspective, and there are countless untold stories waiting to be discovered. It makes you wonder how their voices would enrich our understanding of these clubs and the social dynamics of the time.
Absolutely. Their perspectives could shed light on the impact of these clubs on family dynamics, social expectations, and even gender roles within that society. It's a fascinating avenue for further exploration.
And speaking of untold stories, let's not forget about the experiences of African Americans during this time.
That's an important point. Did African American men participate in these clubs?
Unfortunately, historical records suggest that African Americans were largely excluded from these predominantly white social clubs. This is not surprising considering the racial segregation that was deeply ingrained in American society at the time.
It's a reminder that even within a seemingly niche cultural phenomenon like fat men's clubs, the societal norms and prejudices of the time were reflected. It makes you wonder if there were alternative social spaces where African American men could celebrate their own versions of success and camaraderie.
Absolutely. Their stories deserve to be explored and shared, offering a richer and more nuanced understanding of this era. And speaking of diverse perspectives, let's shift our focus to the decline of these clubs.
Yes, we touched on this earlier, but I'd love to delve deeper into the factors that led to their downfall.
Well, as we discussed, changing social perceptions of obesity played a significant role. As the medical community began to highlight the health risks associated with obesity and the focus on fitness and healthy living gained traction, the celebration of corpulence lost its appeal.
It's a classic example of how social trends can shift dramatically, leaving certain groups stranded on the wrong side of history. But it wasn't just a change in medical understanding, was it?
No, it was a more complex cultural shift. The rise of progressive movements, a greater emphasis on individual health and well-being, and the changing dynamics of social class all contributed to the decline of these clubs.
It's fascinating how something that was once a marker of success and social standing could become almost taboo in a relatively short period of time.
It speaks to the fluid nature of social norms and the constant evolution of cultural values. But let's not forget the positive legacy of these clubs. They offer us valuable insights into a bygone era and remind us that our current perceptions of beauty, health, and social acceptance are not fixed, but are constantly evolving.
It's a reminder to approach history with an open mind and to recognize that even seemingly strange or outdated practices can reveal profound truths about human nature and the complexities of social dynamics.
And with that thought-provoking observation, let's move on to explore another fascinating aspect of fat men's clubs, the psychological underpinnings of their appeal.
Now that's intriguing. I'm curious to understand the deeper motivations behind why these men sought out belonging in these clubs and how their membership shaped their sense of self.
When we explore the psychology of these clubs, it becomes clear that they weren't just about celebrating size. They were about reinforcing a particular worldview.
So it wasn't just about individual vanity, it was about shaping a collective identity.
Exactly. By creating this exclusive space where large size was equated with success and influence, they were essentially validating and perpetuating that belief system within their circles.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more they celebrated their size, the more it became a symbol of status within their social sphere.
And by attracting prominent figures from various fields, businessmen, politicians, community leaders, they lent legitimacy to this perception. It became a powerful social signal.
It's fascinating how these clubs inadvertently reveal the ways in which power and culture intertwine to shape our perceptions of the world. It makes you wonder if there are modern-day equivalents to these clubs groups that, while seemingly harmless on the surface, actually reflect deeper societal values and power dynamics.
That's a great question to ponder, isn't it? What aspects of our current culture might future historians look back on and analyze as we're analyzing these fat men's clubs today? What social gatherings or trends might they find peculiar or even revealing?
It's a humbling thought. But on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up our deep dive into the world of fat men's clubs.
Indeed. These clubs, while seemingly a quirky footnote in history, offer us a valuable lens through which to examine changing social norms, the complexities of identity, and the ever-evolving relationship between body image and social status.
Thanks for tuning in to PastCast. We hope today's episode sparked your curiosity for history. Stay curious and join us next time on PastCast.